Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. I hope you all are having a fantastic day today. I am absolutely loving this weather. It is cool, it is crisp. I am refusing to wear a sweater because I want to feel the cold. I want to feel cold because I feel like I haven't felt cold for about 9 months now. That felt like the longest summer we've ever had, the longest and hottest summer we've ever had. So I am so enjoying this weather, and I feel like my plants are as well. As you can see behind me, I have this awesome stash of fall annuals from Proven Winners. So a big thanks to Proven Winners for sending these out to me. I am so excited to get them planted. I'm not going to plant them today. They include mums, snapdragons, asters, this gorgeous celosia. I can't wait to get them going, but I'm going to be patient and I'm going to wait on those. But I just wanted to give you all a sneak peek. Look at that orange color. Oh, I'm so excited about it. So today I wanted to talk a little bit more about soil blocking. I am doing a massive cut flower garden next year. I was gifted the opportunity of using some property here around town, and I am planning to do a pretty big cut flower garden. So I've been really focusing on sowing seeds for that cut flower garden. I'm going to do the cool flower method. I'm going to do 2 rounds. I'm going to do the cool flower method, and then I'm going to do a summer round with like zinnias and sunflowers and, warm weather flowers. But right now I'm focusing on my cool weather flowers. And there's so many that I didn't have enough room to sow them all in the trays that I usually do. So what I decided to try this year was soil blocking. And so far, it's been working like a charm. It's been really fantastic. It is definitely a skill that you have to kind of develop and learn and figure out how to do it. I really think soil blocking is fantastic because it saves so much space. I can get double, triple the amount of little seedlings in the same space that I would have gotten with the 72 count trays, which are the trays that I normally use. So I think that I will continue using the soil blocking method. However, I think that there's some, there's a learning curve basically. And what I wanted to do today is I wanted to share with you all 5 tips that I have learned thus far for doing soil blocking, just to make it a little bit easier for you all. So if you all are thinking about getting into soil blocking, I wanted to just tell you 5 things that I've learned already. I've only done, let me show you what I've done already. All right, and here is my seed starting station right here. I know it doesn't look that full. It doesn't look like I have a ton of stuff in it. There are actually 1,200 little seedlings already in here. I mean, that's crazy. And you can see I still have more room to put more in. So, soil blocking is the way to go if you are short on space. Absolutely. There are drawbacks to it, and I'll discuss those in a second, but I just wanted to show you all what's kind of going on. You can see this one right here. This one's kind of a mess. I didn't do 1 or 2 seedlings at a time. These are Camelot Mix foxgloves. I kind of just sprinkled them on because the foxglove seeds are so tiny, and I actually harvested these seeds from my flowers or in my yard, so they weren't pelleted or anything like that. But you can see I have gone in and I've tried to thin these so many times, and like this one I thinned, but you see all the soil blocks kind of broke apart. So there are some drawbacks to soil blocking. Here you can see my little contraption that I made for the humidity dome because I'm using these cafeteria trays. These I sewed yesterday. I did like a couple hour sewing session. I didn't film it because I didn't think it would be interesting, but now I kind of wish I did. But I sewed all of these for the next 2 rounds. I missed one of the rounds that I should have done on September 5th. And then I did my next 2 rounds. And so I have all these seedlings ready to go. But you can see my little contraption for the humidity dome because I'm using these cafeteria trays. You can hear a bunch of girls in the background because they had a sleepover last night. So excuse that. Let me go back outside just so it can be a little more quiet. My older daughter, Sadie, my 4th grader, she is in the thick of spending the night at all of her friends' houses. So she goes over to their houses. They come over here. It's so sweet. I absolutely love it. But I feel like we have little girls at our house all the time. which is pretty fun. Okay, so you can kind of see what my soil blocking situation is looking like at this time. Let's get into the 5 tips I have for you all for soil blocking. So my first tip for soil blocking is to think about what you're going to do about the humidity dome over your germinating seedlings. You can see what I'm using right here. Normally, if you're going to sow your seedlings in the regular cell trays, they come with a plastic humidity dome, and that is really convenient and really useful, and it's a piece of cake to lift it up and water them and check on them. When it comes to soil blocks, there's not really that option. And so I think one of the mistakes that I did with the soil blocking is that I purchased these cafeteria trays to put my soil blocks on. And these cafeteria trays have very shallow sides. So when I laid the saran wrap onto them, the saran wrap was actually touching the soil blocks, and as I lifted it up, it would pull off the new germinating seedlings and would just completely ruin them. So that didn't work. So then my next attempt was to put some Legos actually on here to kind of hold the saran wrap away from the soil blocks. I know a lot of people use toothpicks as well. Those actually kept falling over every time I lifted up the saran wrap. So that didn't work. So what I landed on that's working for me right now is I made this little frame out of cardboard, if you guys can kind of see that. And then I wrapped it with saran wrap, and now this is what I'm using as my humidity dome over my trays. I think it would have been so much easier if I just purchased trays that had a little bit deeper sides so that I could just lay the saran wrap directly over it and I wouldn't have to worry about it. Or if you got flat trays that had the plastic humidity dome, that would be great as well. But that's my first tip, is to really think about what you're going to do as a humidity dome for these soil blocks, because you definitely need it to keep it moist while it's germinating. All right, my next tip is making sure that your medium, whatever you're using as soil, whether it is a specific soil blocking mix, or I'm actually cheating and I'm just using some seed starting mix, just basic seed starting mix that seems to be working very, very well, like no problem at all. You want to make sure that it is moist enough. So you can see this right here, this seed starting mix I have. This would be a good moisture level if you were using the regular trays, the trays that we normally use. It stays together, and if I squeeze it, a couple drips will come out. And so this would be the moisture level that I would use for trays. This is way too dry for soil blocking. This needs to be way more saturated for soil blocking for the soil blocks to stay together. So let me show you. I've also found that if you let it sit and hydrate, it actually works even a little bit better. So I don't know if it's peat, I think it's peat that soaks up, it's either coco coir or peat, that soaks up all the moisture, and that's what makes it stick together a lot more easily. So right now, this is the moisture level that I would use for my soil blocks. So it is wet. See that? See how much moisture is coming out when I squeeze it? It's like really, really wet. So when I use my soil block, here's my beautiful soil blocker, and I push it down here, and I'm doing this one-handed, so it's a little tough. But I just make sure that all the blocks are totally filled. Usually I'll use my other hand and kind of stick it in even a little bit more. You really want to smash it in there, which is totally different than your cell blocking or your cell trays. You don't want to smash it in that much, but this one you really want to smash in. Good. Okay, and then as you bring it over here, you want to almost see some liquid come out. There we go. And then that way it will stay together. As you're putting the seeds into those little divots right there, if it's too dry, the blocks will just break apart. Excuse my messy hand. If it's too dry, the blocks will just break apart and it'll get completely messed up. If it's this soaked and this moist, they're gonna stay together. Even if you put a little hole in it and put the seed in, the soil blocks are gonna stay together, which is really, really important. So tip number 2 is making sure that your soil is moist enough. So tip number 3 is to not overseed your soil blocks. Overseeding is something that I often did with cell trays because it was just easier for me, especially when it comes to really, really small seeds like this Camelot Mix Foxglove. The seeds are basically like dust. They're so tiny. They're not pelleted, or at least these I harvested from my own flowers. They're not pelleted. And so to me, it was always just easier just to kind of go like that and then to come through and thin them later. Well, I have already thinned this tray a couple times now, and you can see what difficulty I'm still having. This block right here, this set of blocks, I've completely thinned, and you can see they've all kind of come apart. They're kind of a mess. They keep falling over. You can see right here, I overseeded, and so they're starting to grow out of the sides of the soil blocks and in between the cracks of the soil blocks. So it's just become kind of a mess. They're still healthy seedlings. They're still growing. I will continue to thin them as time goes on, but I learned very quickly that this was not the easiest way to do it with soil blocks. It's much easier to seed when you have cell trays. With soil blocks, they're just too delicate and you can't mess with them that much. So thinning them this much is just not worth it. So I am going to be working on this tray. I don't think I need to start over, but take this as a lesson. Try not to overseed. Try, even with the tiny little seeds, try and just do 1 or 2 in each soil block and keep it at that so you can avoid this debacle. Okay, tip number 4 is using something like a skewer to make holes, the holes in your soil blocks, or to move around the soil. So it's really easy if you have a seed that calls for just lying on top of the soil and needing light to germinate. They have little divots right here in each of the soil blocks. The soil block maker makes the little divots. So it's really easy for the seed to just go and to sit in that divot. What is hard is if you have a seed that needs to be covered or needs to be sown 1/4 inch deep or 1/8 inch deep, that makes it a little bit more difficult. And through trial and error, I found that using a skewer like this or something similar to this, maybe like a toothpick or something, made a huge difference. Because all I had to do is I had to come in here, and with my soil block having enough moisture, I could make little holes like this to put the seed in. I would drop 1 or 2 seeds into each hole, and then I would come around with the pointy end of my skewer and I would just cover the seed back up just like this. So it's very delicate work. It's very fine work. But this is what I found worked the best for sowing those seeds that need to be covered and need to be sown 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch deep. So hopefully this trick helps you guys. I felt like once I got this skewer out and I started using the skewer, it just became so much more easy to really get that seedling or that seed where I needed it to be. All right, then finally, the last tip I have for you all, and I kind of alluded to this already, you are going to need to water your soil blocks way more than you're gonna need to water your cell trays. You're gonna look at them and you're gonna think, oh, those look pretty moist. I don't think I need to water them. Try anyway. So what Lisa Mason Ziegler, who is like the soil blocking queen, she always says, every morning, come in here and go ahead and water. And you want to bottom water just like this. You want to kind of bring it around, making sure that all the soil blocks have water kind of surrounding them. And then you want to let it sit there. And you want to see if the soil blocks are going to soak up this water. So you come back in a couple minutes, and if all of the water is soaked up, actually give them more water after that, right? Because you know that the inside of those blocks are still dry. I watered this last night, so I think that it should be pretty much okay. But if you come back in a couple minutes and there's still standing water here, you don't want to leave this. So I just take this whole thing, I walk it over to the sink, and I just kind of pour the extra out. I do this every single morning for every single one of my trays, just to make sure they stay nice and moist. I kind of messed up on this in the beginning because I actually did not realize how much water they actually need. You can't really tell. You can't tell that the inside of those soil blocks are super, super dry. So, once you get used to it and once you get used to seeing the moisture level of these soil blocks, you'll get it a little bit more. But like I said, it's a learning curve. So you kind of want to just water it, come back in a couple minutes, check it, and then pour off the extra. You can see this one is already soaking up quite a bit of the water, and I did not think it needed any water at all, but it still is soaking up a bit. So I bet if I come back in a minute or two, it's going to have totally soaked up the water. So tip number 5 is that you are going to need to water these soil blocks a lot more than you think. There's so much more open surface area for the water to evaporate that it's just gonna take a lot more moisture to keep these blocks hydrated, and you want to keep them hydrated. Obviously not overhydrated, because then that can cause rotting and mold and fungus gnats and all that kind of stuff. But doing this technique that Lisa Mason Ziegler came up with, I don't know if she came up with it, I found it's really helpful once I started doing that. I will link her YouTube channel below. She has a lot of really great videos on soil blocking. I kind of think of her as the soil blocking queen. So she is really, really helpful. So yeah, so soil blocks are not, it's not a method that you can kind of just leave it and not really think about it. Like those cell trays that have the self-watering feature, I used that before and I found those really easy, and you can leave them for a while, but it just takes up so much room. So you kind of have to check on these every single day. You kind of have to know this is going to be, you know, it's going to be intense. It's going to have to be something you can take care of. But I have 1,200 little seedlings right here in this small little space, and I'm not even full yet. So that makes it all worth it to me. So those are my 5 tips for soil blocking. As I continue doing this, hopefully I'll come up with some more tips for you all. I will definitely share them with you. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you all have a chance to get into your garden today.